It's my terrific pleasure to welcome you to the Frank-Ratchye Studio for Creative Inquiry, which is the research lab of our College of Fine Arts and is dedicated to atypical, anti-disciplinary, and interinstitutional research and outreach at the intersection of art, science, technology, and culture. I'm Golan Levin, and tonight it's my great pleasure to welcome you here and to introduce Taeyoon Choi, an artist whom I've known, I guess, since 2008 at the Open Frameworks Lab. Taeyoon is a Korean-American artist. He was born in California, lived for 10 years in Seoul. Went to grad school in performance art at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago.
Undergrad.
Sorry, undergrad in performance art. And did you go to grad school? At the Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology. That's KAIST, that's what it's called. And Taeyoon has a very diverse practice. He's a curator. He's an artist who works in what we here in the School of Art call contextual practice or relational aesthetics or art and context. Does a lot of interesting sort of interventions in public space. And also for the last 6 or 8 years has been involved in the Open Frameworks community and in the creative technology and new media arts community. Taeyoon's also a really wonderful educator and is a co-founder with Zach Lieberman, Amit Pitaru, and Jen Lowe of the School for Poetic Computation in New York City, which is an artist-led school. So tonight, Taeyoon is going to talk a bit about some of that and also about some of his plans for his upcoming residency here at the Frank-Ratchye Studio for Creative Inquiry. Sometime later this fall, Taeyoon will be spending approximately a month with us here while he works on a project. I guess he can announce can you announce your big news about the commission yet or no? No, you can't. So he's received a commission from the LACMA, the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, for one of these large art and technology grants, and so probably pending legal agreements, be able to develop some of it here. And I think with that said, I think Taeyoon's got a fantastic sense of code, poetics, and people, and I'd like to hand it off to him. So, here you are.
All right, thank you. Oh my God, that was stunning. So I gotta come out. So Golan was a hero in 2004. He did a couple of projects at Ars Electronica, and I was following that as an undergraduate and graduate student. So there was mostly the ringtones project, which you could make music with cell phones. And back then it was like, oh, music and cell phones, so it's so cool. And Mesa di Voce and a couple other things. So it's a great pleasure to come here, and thank you for inviting me. So I did apply for a residency last year, and I can read some of the things I wrote, but I forgot most of it. But I'm gonna catch you up on some of the things that I've been working. This past year has been really busy. And some of the questions and propositions that I have for myself and for the community at the Carnegie Mellon and Studio for Creative Inquiry. So thank you so much. And I would like to also say, John Rubin, it's really nice to see you again, because we are working on a same festival in South Korea. It's called Anyang Public Art Festival. So Conflict Kitchen is there at the moment. So they do work with North Korean refugees and relocated residents in South Korea. So I was involved in that to a very minimal degree, but I was involved in making a laboratory at the same festival. So on that note, I think I'm like really against PowerPoint, but I just cannot avoid using it. Let's see. So I made a couple of slides, 16 slides for tonight, and I have a couple of things that I want to cover. So I'm going to jump between a couple of slides that I've used to talk about the school, the lab, and my personal practice. But I want to give you a rundown of what I'm going to talk about for the next 30 minutes. And just going to be 30 minutes, and I'll open up for some discussion. So this is where I'm at. I'm really interested in open source in terms of art and also technology, and activism as a way of living, and public space as a shared space where we can talk. I was really inspired by Occupy movement in New York City a few years ago, and the things that happened after Occupy that was still relevant, such as solidarity groups, Occupy Sandy, which was an emergency risk network of individuals for technologists or healthcare people, or even a chef who would provide a support for the people who are displaced from their home when the National Guard couldn't go to their home. So that was really inspiring. And there was also an occupied library. They were archiving really recent developments in political thoughts. I'm interested in public space because I think architecture and everything around it is really defining the way we think. I think there's an amazing parallel between computation and public space, and urban planning and circuitry, and code and public behavior. So public space, for me, is a place to work, and also a place to meet people. And I have like art on the one side that's connecting all these things. And to me, the big question is like, where does open source and art meet? And I know how like activism and art would meet, and I know how public space and art would meet, but like art, open source and art, I mean, there's the usual things of like, let's say media art or Creative Commons or collaboration, but how can this new culture be a foundation for artistic freedom that we have not seen before? So I'm just pulling out some literature. There's two literature that I'm using as a reference tonight. One of them is The New Rules for Public Art by Situations. They're a collective based in the UK. And it's just 11 questions that they have for themselves and other artists. I'm pulling a few of them. And it says, it doesn't have to look like a public art. And I think that's taken for granted, especially in a place like Carnegie Mellon School of Art, where the contextual practice or socially engaged art is actually a really big part of the artistic creativity that happens here. And less so in more of an administrative or sort of fine art world. But the question I have is like, yeah, it doesn't have to look like public art, but what does it look like? What can it look like? And it leads to this question of like, is it art? And my quick answer for that question is, it does not have to be a representation of the social movement or engagement or any sort of relationship, but it wants to be an activation and a facilitation of relationships. So that's where the performance art comes in, and sort of Alan Capro or John Cage, back in the days. But also activism as a way of living. Meaning it's not an end in itself, it's a means and an end at the same time. So I like to compare activism to religion, because I'm not religious, but I'm kind of I take activism as one of a religion that I actually practice. And number 3 is don't make it for community, create a community. And I'm going to talk about 2 projects that I worked on in the past year. One of them is based in Brooklyn, New York, and one of them is in Anyang, South Korea. So 2 different places. I was flying between those places like 5 to 6 times in a year, and yeah, that was a really bad idea. But yeah, and in the end, like it was a really interesting experience of living in 2 places. So let me talk about these 2 projects quickly, so you have an idea of like where I come from. So I'm one of the co-founder of the alternative artist-run school called the School for Poetic Computation. And Taeyoon. And I build circuits. Hacking and making circuits, coding in a very low level is a really big part of my practice. I enjoy understanding and performing small things with electronics and code. And I try to go as least of a low level as possible, meaning transistors, resistors, and capacitors, and sometimes integrated circuits. I like it because building a circuit is like building a city. And I made that comparison already of public space and computation. But when I see a multiplexer, which is telling where to go for data to go, it looks like a street light guiding cars to go someplace. When I see a memory, a data storage, it seems like a house where you keep all your belongings. And transistor is like an amplifier and a switch. So all this comparison is really exciting for me in terms of thinking about computers, which is super close to us, and also the city where we live. And this is me trying to make an analog sine wave, which is sort of one thing that you have to do at one point. And switching back from digital square wave to analog is a really beautiful process of sort of shrinking the signal into a continuous form. So analog and digital, the differentials and dialectic. So between those two areas, there's a space for creative freedom that I'm excited about. And I'm using mostly like TTL chips, which is like super archaic. Like people really don't use it. They use like CMOS chips usually. And these are the building blocks for computers back in the days when it was mostly homebrew. And I'm sure some of you know it. And the only people that actually use this now are either military or research initiatives, like at universities for teaching. So to make art with it, to think about it as a creative space, has some sort of a nostalgia and also a desire for archive, desire for the past to come activated again. And it gets complex quite soon once you try to do real arithmetics with the computation. So this is trying to make an adder and a subtractor with 4 chips. So it's a NAND and an XOR gate, and there's kind of interesting things that happens when you have to actually reconfigure the circuitry in a breadboard that's not meant to do it. So kind of all the wires on top of each other. And I'm interested in this as two different concepts. So software noir, which I take the term from Design Noir by Don and Raby in UK. They're a professor at Royal College of Art. And software fiction is that all these softwares that I think about do not really need to work as a piece of software. It needs to work as an idea. It needs to work as a story. And hardware noir, because I'm not trying to make a really functional, user-friendly, ultimate like user experience device. I'm really thinking about the core of computation and sort of dark potentials of it. So these two words are keywords that I think about a lot. And this is a small module that I've made with quad NAND gate and a hex inverter. So it's two chips. And it's configurable, it's programmable by plugging in to the pins on the top and at the bottom. So it means that I could technically create any signals that I want in configuring these two very simple chips, connecting wires on top of each other. It's a really minimalist idea, and I like the poetics of it. I like how really simple elements could be used to make any signals you want in terms of the digital. I mean, not anything, but almost anything that I would want. And it's inspired by like modular synthesizers, which are used for music mostly. And I think that analog computers had a great potential in the 50s and 60s, almost even in the 40s. And then digital computers came in, and sort of like that just didn't go anywhere except for Army. So I think the modular synthesizer musicians are really exploiting the possibilities of analog computing. And it sounds amazing. There's a couple of musicians that I follow that are inspiring. And it just becomes unbearably complex pretty soon. And I'm not coming from an engineering background, so it really is more of a hacking and exploring at this point. So I don't know, but it works, and sometimes it's the other way around. But I really want to inspire everyone to be in this place, which is either that you don't know and it works, or the other way around. Because that's the only way like hacking happens. So a little bit of personal history. I was living in South Korea until 2007, after undergraduate degree in Chicago. And I was working as an artist and doing some freelance work. And I was lucky enough to go to Eyebeam as a resident in 2008. That's where I met Zach and a lot of other colleagues that I work at the moment. So we would do workshops, and this interactive is a 2 weeks workshop. You come up with an idea, or you can come up as a skill set. You come up with a skill set. So we pair people up to collaborate in 2 weeks period. And the idea is that the project is not necessarily the most important thing, it's the relationship. So that you get to know more people and you get to make new friends. This is Marcos, who's I think is the director of a Media Lab Prado in Madrid. So this project started in Madrid, so they came to New York. That's my robotic picture-taking duck that I made at Eyebeam. And 2008, you see Golan, all right? So that's when I met Golan. So we did another project at Ars Electronica, which is called OF Lab, Open Frameworks Lab. And the idea was that the public would give an idea at the first floor of a gallery, and then a bunch of hackers would develop it overnight or over a day, and then we would notify them when we have the project ready, and design the graphics. And there's a social aspect to it, which is a lounge area. So these art festivals are super intense, so this was a place to chill out and meet people. And Tina, who's an illustrator. And the things we do are not really high-tech. I mean, there's a lot of smart people in the room, and there were a lot of smart people in that room too. But idea really is to come up with a system where we could find each other for more collaboration in the future. Oh, there's Dan Wilcox. I met him there too, yeah. Oh, he's not gonna see the slide. All right, so yeah, this is like 2008 was like a really good point where I was inspired by an open source community. I wasn't programming so much at then, I wasn't hacking so much at then, but it seemed much easier than I thought, so that was really inspiring. In 2009, we were teaching at Parsons School for Design, which is a big university. And there were some problems with it. I mean, the Parsons students and the faculty and the whole environment is amazing. It's just that teaching at a graduate program has some constraints that I didn't foresee. And I took the other way out, which is trying to organize free classes in New York City. And New York has such a surplus of amazing people. And people who are eager to learn that we could organize a class on anything in 2 weeks period. So I was a committee member at the public school in New York, which is a proposition to have a class in public space. So the public would propose an idea, or like a class idea, and the committee would find teachers and space. And we would pair them up and be there. And they would have a class in Occupy Wall Street or in a gallery or at Eyebeam. So this was really interesting because we had classes on smell, like scents, classes on sort of contemporary French philosophy, class on sound art. So anything that was desired at the moment was delivered. And it got really, really popular. So this is a class that I helped organize the Darkness of the Universe with Alex Galloway, who's a scholar and an artist, and a few others, Eugene Tacker and Mackenzie Work. It was great. The discussions were forming and there was a sense of community, but it was not a sustainable model. For example, we were not getting paid and we were not hoping for, but we wished that the people who are hosting us would get at least some pay. And the donations didn't really work. We didn't want to do a Kickstarter, so it sort of became a project of more of a, we're looking for more longevity than an intensity at this point. And being involved with the Occupy and different perspectives of living in the city, I became really aware of the student debt. And as a person who was applying for a job in colleges to teach, I felt sort of, I felt problematic about getting people into, this system of debt. And the social practice as an art form is, it's like a new genre, and it's been done. So the question really is like, what kind of school do you want to see? What kind of teacher do you want to be? And what kind of student do you want to be? And I think those 3 questions are actually the same. And personally, as a person who really enjoyed practicing yoga, even the best teachers are always the best student. So it's the dichotomy between student and teacher does not really make sense to me. So we try to encourage students to teach and vice versa. And Zach announced the school at a couple of places, and we started meeting. Amit and Jen, I did not know before so well, but it was through this opportunity that I got to know them. And we called for students. And he gave a talk at I.O. And I do a lot of the visuals and sort of curatorial side of the school, so I made some drawings about like why we want to do this school and why we're against sort of the largest school or the most expensive school. And this culture of demo or die. Because I think the media art or the art and technology has this problem of being in the intersection of sort of a technical R&D and artistic creativity. So you have to implement it. So we value the projects that do not work. And then we value the ideas that are too impossible to come true. That's us. This is a crazy space we had. These are all just friends. And we picked 15 students out of 65 plus applicants from around the world based on their portfolio, their application, and diversity. Diversity in terms of everything you can imagine, but also technical proficiency. So it was not a school for just beginners or the advanced coders. So Zach taught C++ and animation and computer vision. Jen taught math for artists, art for mathists. And she also organized an amazing dinner, which I'm going to talk about. Amit taught a class, Learning to Learn. And it was a meta class about the philosophy and sort of your perspective in learning. I taught hardware, electronics, and very simple things. And also I taught a class called Art of Walking, which I took the students once in the whole week to walk outside of our building. That's the students. We try to do a lot of things off screen, although we're teaching computation, like body movements or drawing. And this is where I sort of understand what we mean by poetic computation. I get that question a lot. So there's the poetics in the way computers work, which I'm sure you will all agree. And there are the poetic things that you could do with computers that are not explored. And we use the word poetic because we do not want to use creative or artistic. I feel like creative computation or creative coding is already branded for sort of a very startup-y marketing language. And artistic coding is already explored with experiments in art and technology and Fluxus and onward. And I feel like the poetic, we use the word poetic as a reference to poiesis, which means to create. So what does it mean we create with computers? And this creative computing word is problematic because it makes every other sort of computing not creative. But we think all coding is creative. So these are just some example of the tutorials that I make for the students. Some of them are online and some of them are not, just because I haven't got around to it. Yeah, I teach super low level stuff because I'm familiar with the most elementary stuff. And I think it's interesting when simple things do amazing, complex behaviors. And it's really an experiment for teaching because as a group of 4 people, we taught a lot, and we want to teach differently, and we want to see what's the ideal environment for learning. For example, Jen's open dinner was amazing. So she organized a dinner every week, Thursday night, because she was working at a restaurant some time ago, and she could manage like a food for 30 people. And yeah, it was awesome. And my class was really about deviation, so get out of the computers. And to go to strange places and read some strange text like George Perec or Italo Calvino or Walter Benjamin or Susan Borgmors. Some of the more critical theory stuff that I'm interested about. Yeah. And we stopped calling our participants as students at some point. I mean, we still call them until the end as a sort of a technical term, but we are going to start to call them participants from this point. And we're not calling homework, but propositions. And that's Andy Clymer, who's a type designer and an expert in Python scripting for font management, because that's what he does. But he has not experience in like C++ or other language, but with Python and type, he was excellent at it. So he taught a class for the students that reason, on that topic.
But he himself was a student?
Yes.
Right.
So the students were doing sessions. And we had a lot of visiting artists. Brett came, Ramsey, Brian House, and also Golan, and so many more. But let me just wrap up this way. So I see this as a social practice. I see the school, at least for me, I don't think other founders see it that way. I see it as a way of actually creating a community, sense of community. So when you're coding, you're always debugging alone, but what if you debug together? And what if you become really attentive and present for each other? That's Lo Wei, who was actually a student at Carnegie Mellon, Golan student a few years ago. Yeah, we had an amazing space in 33 Flatbush Avenue, downtown Brooklyn. This time we're going to be in 155 Rivington in Lower East Side. That's Tiva. So Jonathan Dahan was actually an alumni of Carnegie Mellon. Shout out. But he's a CS major and he's a programmer at the moment. But he tried painting for the first time. And he painted Piet, which is a programming language based on shapes and color. So this is actually, he's painting an echo. And he was so excited about this idea of painting and working with paint. So something new for everyone. Yeah, I mean, it was a really strange place, so there was a lot of like flies. But once again, I would just want to stress this part. But this is Zach's daughter and Paul, one of the students' daughter. They're making friends and making art for the future. And we had our final exhibitions at Eyebeam. Big turnout. Super happy. So this is my desk. Like my desk looks like this anywhere I go, even in Korea or anywhere. Just beer and then oscilloscopes. Some of the students' work is an in-security camera. It's a surveillance camera that looks away when you're looking at it. A Talking by Ishak and John. They're playing Pong with computer vision. So if you're standing between these two monitors, you cannot play Pong. But they had this elaborate process of diagramming their conversation and two people getting to know each other. And one's a designer and one's a coder / artist. So they were debugging together and then writing code together and teaching. So Talking as a sort of this is really an archive of their experience. Paul Chang from Shanghai, amazing project. So he's really sensitive about the air quality in China and sort of the global implications of what that means. And he made a mask that reacts with sound and light when the air quality is low. It makes really funny noise and it lights up. But he did all this research about the air quality and like how he can use this. And I think the funniest thing was when he showed this project to his father, who runs companies in Shanghai, his father was like, let's make that a product and then sell it. And he didn't want to do it, but I was like, you should do it. Because there's a different ways of making social impact, and making a startup is definitely one of it. And Lo Wei, she visualized all the text that she sent over 5 years, database. And big part of the school is that we are super transparent. You can see how much I got paid and how much everyone got paid. And we've had enough to pay back students after the school was over. So we paid everyone about $700 back. Some of them decided not to take it as a donation for the school. Yeah, we should have taken account the tax situation, which we are suffering right now. But yeah, the teachers get paid about, the full-time teachers get paid $10K, the part-time teachers get paid like $3 to $4K, and visiting artists get paid anywhere between $200 to $400 per day, and artists and residents get paid like $700 to $800 a day, which is all fair. But it was only possible because our rent was really low, because the owner of our space was super, super awesome. But this time it's going to be higher, so everything is on a scaling basis. Actually, our financial info is on our GitHub, github.com/sfpc, so you can see every single transaction. That's us. And just a snapshot of Zach teaching in Korea.
what I want you to do. I want you to figure out the distance between you two, and I want you to move halfway there.
네, 서로 얼마나 떨어져 있는지 확인하시고 절반만큼 움직이시면 되겠습니다.
So figure out where you think halfway is, and then move that way.
So he's trying to explain Zeno's paradox, which is that you're trying to walk half of the distance between one and the other, and you can never get close because you're getting half of the past.
지금 기준에서 다시 중간 지점이 어딘지 확인하시고 생각해보시고
Between where you are and where you want to go, and then I want you to move halfway again.
다시 움직이고 생각해보십시오.
And then halfway again,
다시 절반만큼
and then halfway again.
다시 절반만큼
So this is
Yeah, that was really cute. They couldn't get close because they're shy.
right.
Anyway. So, yeah, that's it for the SFPC. I'm like already 30 minutes. I'm like halfway through. Do you have any questions about SFPC? Because I'm gonna go to the other side of the world. Okay, just keep rolling. All right, I'll just do really quickly. All right. So that was about making a community and making a school. And it says recipe for failure. So share your ownership freely, but authorship wisely. I think that's really important, especially if you're working in the realm of open source and public art. What does it mean to collaborate? What does it mean to have participants? And I'm trying to operate between these different worlds of artist-run spaces and my own survival, because I'm a human being, I need to eat, and open source and social practice, which do not generate a lot of income, and I'm fine with that. But yeah, I'm trying to understand. So the big question for Golan and John Rubin that I want to ask is that how am I going to survive? So that's my research question for the next year, right? Because I do all these things, I'm still pretty not that wealthy, in the best way possible. So withdraw from the cultural arms race. Yeah, this is a really tricky thing because, we were talking about Eyebeam and art festivals in Korea and CMU, and these are all cultural capital. And I'm operating in the world. But how can we avoid it being a competition about how much cultural capital and network you have? And again, back to the slide. So that's where the pedagogy and education and sense of community comes in really important. Yeah, I'm gonna say one thing which is kind of problematic. There's a free and art and technology lab, Fat Lab, which all of amazing artists and friends. But their hackers were operating online, working in pop culture and art and tech, doing amazing projects, but super exclusive. So you had to be in. And I think that's really not a good way of open source community. So what I try to do with the SFPC and other projects to make it accessible. So we try to make it accessible by opening up with the application process that's transparent, and also workshops that you can just participate in being part of the community. Experiments in art and technology in the 60s and 70s, amazing project. But I think longevities are always difficult because a lot of these are based on the virtuosity of the artist, or the dominating sort of a curatorial vision. So how can we make it so that it's sustainable and sort of supportive? And I'm gonna go to Pablo. Pablo is an artist and educator at MoMA, and artist. I think mostly socially practiced artists. So on the bottom it says, we do not want symbolic practice, which is art about social change. We want actual practice that is art that embodies social change. So what does that mean? So I didn't know, so I was trying to understand what that means. So the bottom half is more important. So the pedagogy and education, emphasis on embodiment of process and dialogue. So this is my brain space. Yeah, I think the oddball here is the painting and drawing. Because I still want to make paintings and art. Although I'm really into this social practice and I don't know how that really fits in. And I want to survive as an artist, happy, all these things, and I still don't have an answer for it. So maybe at the residency I can figure that out through some counseling and emotional support. This is still Pablo. SEA means socially engaged art. So the emphasis here is really on the social action. So let me get some social action in place. And I love when people show their computer. Let me see. Let's go start with this. So I run a small laboratory in South Korea. It's called Making Lab, and it's situated in an amazing building built by Álvaro Siza, who's a Portuguese architect. And part of the building is a library for public art, which the city of Anyang, about 40 minutes away from Seoul, they do a public art festival every 3 times a year, big cultural arms race. So I was approached by the director to do a media art exhibition. And I was like, I do not want to do an exhibition, I want to do a workshop. And in order to do a workshop, you need to have a laboratory. And the big part of the laboratory was actually commissioning these open source kits. And the core curatorial vision was to make computation accessible through the act of making and super low cost material. And I find references in Fluxus boxes, which is basically a briefcase full of amazing cards and toys that you could play. Some of them super absurd. The favorite is a can that you can't open unless you have a can opener, and inside of the can is a can opener. And we write instructions and manuals as well as physical kits. This is a couple of local students making a FM radio transmitter and a receiver. Kobakant is a group of hackers based in Berlin, 2 amazing women, Hana and Rika. And so what they did in Anyang was they collected wishes from the public, wishes by children or anyone in the street about electronic desire. What do you want your electronics to be? And select participants, including hackers and dressmakers, realize that wish over a weekend. So it's like a hackathon, teaching, and a public participatory performance. So as a PC, I hired myself to do another kit. So again, this is similar to what I explained. And Unpa Industries, local artists and hackers, they made a couple of kits based on the theme of survival. How can you survive after electronics, after electricity? The communication kit, and also they did solar power kit. So we don't sell it. We charge for workshops, super cheap, $5 for local kits, $20 for non-local residents, and we produce 300 kits. And all the plans and details are on our website. So there's this world of sort of engineering or art and tech things called STEAM, science, tech, what is it? STEAM.
Engineering, art, math.
Right. So I think that's awesome. It's just some people are taking it a super startup way. So we want to take it more down to earth way, more punk rock way. So we don't sell it, we don't distribute it, but we make plans easy enough that you can make it. So that's our explanation, because a lot of times we get asked, are you going to give it for free? So that's just some images from the Making Lab, and let me show you just 1 or 2 video. 시민들한테 소원을 직접 받았어요. 전자적인 소원이라고.
We were with lab coats.
이런 서비스가 있으면 좋겠다라고 하는 거를 지금 호바칸트와 지금 같이 구현을 한 건데요.
And this board is a very basic circuit, so it's a switch and the light comes on. This is a truck and the blinking. So I push and hold and it blinks. 이 부분을 이런 식으로 딱 이제 전기가 통하는 거거든요. 그래서 여기서 이제 하면 단추로 연결해서 하면 코에 불이.
So these are wishes that they collected from local kids, and they made it over a day or two.
You also can make your own. You also can. 너가 직접 그려도 되고.
And it's really important to mix participants in terms of age and technical skills. We had really young, 10 years old, and much older people. And issues of translation is really difficult because a lot of artists are coming from everywhere. So a lot of what I do is actually translation. It's a rebelling me.
제가 받은 소원은 인형을 꼭 끌어안으면
So if you
열이
hug
나와서
the toy,
따뜻해지는
it gets warm.
네, 스위치를 손에다 달아서
So that's a
이거를
switch.
조금만 누르고 있으면 이게 열이 오면은 색깔이 변하는
The fabric changes
편인데요.
color when it's heated.
여기가 하늘색으로 조금씩 변하고 있어요 지금 이렇게 되거든요. 그래서 여기서 열이 나오는 거예요. 감사합니다.
They worked on it together. So that was Wish Lab. That was a one more workshop. We had more girls than guys. So yeah, I think I can sort of like wrap up. Let me see. At the studio, I want to do a couple of things. I want to think, and then engage in conversations with a lot of you. And so this is what I'm going to do. All right, 2 more minutes. Alan Newell, do you know this guy?
He's passed away.
Yeah, I know.
He used to be here.
Yeah, until 92. So that's really exciting. I want to do a project about memories and computation. I'm curious about the neural plasticity, which means to receive form and to give form. And it's in opposition with flexibility. So to me, open source feels like flexible or modular, or this universal idea of like things that could be applied for everything. But I don't think the world operates that way. I think the world operates plastically, meaning that it's really affected every time you make a mark. So it's sort of revolting against sort of idea of cybernetics, but how can we live plastically? So that's one of the questions. And I want to engage in conversation with different scientists and artists at Carnegie Mellon. And I'm really looking forward to the soft collaboration with Golan. And the soft collaboration means like, it's mentorship and also help with the logistics and sort of sharing the vision. And interested meaning like dancers and actors, using stage as a public space, and laboratory as a studio, and creating events like this, social events that are possibly an exhibition or a book. So that's it, and I'll be back here pretty soon, and I look forward to meeting every one of you again.
When are you here?
We're trying to figure that out tomorrow.
Probably the early fall.
Yeah, next semester, beginning of next semester.
Thank you very much, Taeyoon.